Today we will talk about infrastructure as tool called Azure Bicep, sorry. So what we are going to cover first is the understanding of how Azure Bicep and Terraform plays into this ecosystem and their differences and commonality. Second, if you're looking for a to implement a tool, so some decision making tools that you can use, whether you should go for Azure Biceps or you go for Terraform or OpenTofu, and then we'll deploy some apps and see how it works. So let's dig into the design philosophy, implementation design, and use cases. So I have prepared a simple comparison chart between Azure Bicep and Terraform. So Azure Bicep was designed by Microsoft to have a very good and one-to-one mapping for ARM template for their Azure ecosystem. So assume if you want to deploy any application or infrastructure, network, whatever you want to deploy on Azure, you can pretty much use these templates to do anything you want. On the other hand, Terraform was kind of a pioneer in this infrastructure as code or IAC, popularly known as, where it actually kind of created the industry of how it should be done and how it should be defined and creating a design pattern. And later on, a lot of tools came along. Again, Terraform was not the first tool, but it is one of the most popular tool. Became very predominant around 2015-16, around that time. And the key focus of Terraform is not only for a public cloud, it's actually to help you do all kind of a firewall, VMware, any kind of infrastructure. As long as API and modules are available, you can apply those design principle to make a infrastructure as code where your all configurations are stored as a code into Git repository or S3 bucket instead of a kind of a tacit knowledge in the head of a network engineer or a DevOps engineer. Second, the biggest difference, I would say Azure Bicep and Terraform, they are pretty much similar, other than the one big difference is the state management. In case of Azure Bicep, the complete state management is taken care by Microsoft. What it does, they have a pre-flight, they run the template and make sure the template is good. On the other hand, in case of Terraform, the responsibility of managing the state file goes to the developer. So most developer either they use a local Terraform state file, which is simply a JSON file, or you can use S3 bucket packed or DynamoDB, or if you are a licensed user, you can use Terraform Enterprise for that purpose. In terms of programming language, they look similar. It's a JSON style, it's a HashiCorp, they call HashiCorp style a DSL. So it's a pretty much domain specific language. And Bicep provided best-in-class Azure resource mapping one-to-one from ARM, as I already mentioned. And in case of Terraform, it's not exactly one-to-one mapping. And you will see when we actually go through a code base, you will see how Azure Bicep actually takes the stuff from pretty much the definition of the ARM APIs and put into the code. So that gives a kind of a understanding how it is designed. And now comes the decision making process. So if you're looking to choose any infrastructure as tool, and the biggest deciding factor will be, are you a Azure shop or you are a hybrid cloud or you have an on-prem system. So for if you're an Azure shop and you think you will not move to any other platform, then it's no brainer, you just go with the Bicep, because Bicep gives you a lot of free templates, easily available templates are available, and you can use it. And and another thing is the cost of managing Azure Bicep is kind of free, because you don't have to bother or worry about the state file, state management, and all this thing, because by design the Bicep take care of that. So the state management is, you are offloading it to Azure to take care of it. On the other hand, if you are looking for a more hybrid system, in that case Terraform or OpenTofu might be very good, for obvious reason, because you can write a Terraform template which deploys an application throughout different cloud provider or even in your firewall or internal switches. So that is a powerful. Second thing I would say, the developer ecosystem is more mature for Terraform compared to Bicep because it's just a newer system. But I would say that thing has been muted vastly because of so many Copilot, Chat GPT based things. So you can actually generate a lot of easy to use templates that you can use in your case. And other thing what I've seen is Microsoft does a really good job in putting a lot of examples in their Git repositories so that people can use and modify it. So that is another thing. And again, if you are a company or organization, it is easier to find people with Terraform experience as compared to Bicep experience. But again, if someone is a seasoned DevOps engineer, for them it should not be too complicated to switch in between. Both are, I would say, reasonably easy. And the last thing I already mentioned, the cost management. So these things you have to keep in mind before choosing or making the decision. And here is a breakdown of the workflow, if you may, if you are going to use it. So in Terraform case, you have to init. You have to always init it. What it does during the init process, it downloads the dependent modules into your local folder or local directory so that can be used. And then you run Terraform plan, which actually creates the plan is the one which compares the state file with the what is in the infrastructure, and then it tells what difference will be applied. And the same thing you can achieve in Azure Bicep using what if does the same thing. And then you do Terraform apply, or you can use similar command. You can see tofu open tofu, which is the open source version of it, and you can do the same thing and create. In the case of Bicep, it creates the infrastructure. And another thing you'll see the difference is the Azure Bicep doesn't have a clear cut destroy command. So what you do is instead you simply use Azure CLI, AZ to delete that resource. It's pretty straightforward and simple. So that is the quick comparison. Now let's jump into some deploying some applications using Azure Bicep. Now let's deploy some applications using Azure Bicep templates. So here is one repository I have created where I keep all these tools, and I'll post the link about it. And here you can see instructions are there how to clone the repository, and the templates here are actually taken from Microsoft open source GitHub repository, which actually gives a lot of templates. What I do, I copy from there and do a little bit modification and then use it here. So I've used it in my own environment as well. So I'll post link for that link, and here is the information. So if I go there, you can see here pretty much everything is defined. uh, what needs to be done, just steps to install Azure CLI. And here I have two examples set up, one for SQL Server, one for MySQL. Today's example, I will do MySQL, a simple MySQL flexible server, how to deploy. And you can see the commands here. The DSL is pretty straightforward. It's description, you add a param. So whenever you see param means you're defining a variable in this ecosystem. and and these parameters you can actually define into the template itself, or you can keep it on a different parameter file. I usually like this format of putting into a parameter file because that makes it very, I would say, secure or a best practice in a way that you are segregating code and passwords into a separate file. What happens is that later on, if you want to do a CI/CD pipeline or something like that, you can have the template stored into Git repository and have these parameter JSON pulled from some other secure source, for example, for one password or some other kind of a vault. So that makes it very secure to deploy. And in this case, you define everything about that particular thing, like a SKU name. And good thing about this is you don't have to remember most of it. You just go and if you have access to, pretty much everybody has access to chat GPT or something, you can actually generate the template, or you can go to the this repository I'm mentioning about, and that has all the information. And then you start modifying it. You start playing around a little bit here and there. For example, the repository which I copied, it had something different. It had the public DNS enabled, so I disabled that part just for me, easy, and added this simple NAT rule to open access from everywhere. And then you basically go ahead and deploy. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and deploy into my environment. So this is, I've already cloned this one, this repository. So simply follow the steps, I will simply follow the steps which are mentioned into the repository itself. So first thing what I do here is I need to make sure that my template is working. So anytime whenever you are going to deploy a template, always try this what if method. So if I do what if, and when I do that, and of course make sure you have done AZ login. If you're using WSL, AZ login doesn't pop up the whole portal. You have to copy paste the URL and then sign into your Azure account. So you can see here is running. So this is very similar to your Terraform plan, and it gives you a complete picture of what is being done. So it is running, and it will actually show you in a green. You can see here it shows everything on the green, what is there or not. And second thing what I can do is now I can see everything is working, and because if it's not working it will throw error. And then what I do here is I go and just do a create here. Once I do create, it will run in background. It will take a couple of minutes to deploy this template. So I'll skip the video for that. See, my resource is ready. So, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to log into this MySQL instance, and I will use the password which is on the parameters file. It is simple password 123, and I go put it, and you can see my MySQL is ready here. I can do show databases. So, and you can now whatever you want to do. And just to complete this example, I will go ahead and delete the instance because I don't want to it keep consuming the resource. So you can see the command is also there. There is no specific bicep command, but you have to give a easy command to delete it. And let me check. Yeah, this is the output. This is the output how it looks like when you run the it is successful. And in the output what happens is that you can define what values you want to show. So example, if you go there and into this file, there is a you can see there is an output section, and you can tell exactly what things need to be outputted. So this is very important to know, because if you are writing some kind of automation on CI/CD, so these output variables you can pick it up for the subsequent step on the CI/CD. So I can go ahead and just delete this instance, and now of course it will start run and delete. So that was a quick and short example of how you can use Azure Bicep templates to quickly deploy any Azure native services, and also you can do pretty much complex stuff. And in the next video we'll see some of the example where how we can use an existing Azure resource. Say if you created the Azure resource using graphical user interface and you want to convert into a bicep. A lot of people doing that. So we'll go through that also. And thank you for watching.